What's up, everyone? Welcome to Level 7. It is time for another episode of the Agents of Fandom podcast. My name is TJ Zwarich, and we're fresh off recording Star Wars Bad Batch episodes 1 through 5, a breakdown review. We got some crazy theories, so make sure you check out that one. And now it is time to spice things up a little bit. We're going to head to Arrakis, and we are going to break down Dune Part 2, the biggest movie of 2024 so far. And help me break it down, I got my co-host, good buddy, as always, Adam Blevins. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Yeah, two Dune puns for you in the intro there. That was impressive work. But it'll never not be weird for me, like we've talked about before on these double headers when we record episodes back to back, being asked how I'm doing twice in a span of like 45 minutes, which is funny because for the people listening, there's no concept of that. Like I said, the double headers kind of exist outside space and time. But yeah, I mean, I have not been shy or candid at all with my movie, and like on social media or since I saw it a week and a half ago. And I don't plan on doing that on this podcast either. So I'm very excited to talk about it.
We exist outside of space and time, just like the Bene Gesserit. See, I'm ready for all of them. I'm ready for all of them. And not that they exactly exist outside of space and time, but you know what I mean. Yeah. Helping us break it down as well, we got our fellow agent, Emma Doris. How are you doing today, Emma?
Doing pretty well also. I feel like in the movie that experience existed outside of space and time as well, because it was just such a true like escape. So I'm hoping this does too. I like being outside of space and time sometimes. Little break from reality.
Like we mentioned, our previous episode covering the Bad Batch. Before that, we have our full breakdown of Avatar: The Last Airbender. So make sure you check out those episodes. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell if you're watching us on YouTube. And these videos, I've been watching them. They've been popping. The views are good. Nobody's hitting that like button, though. We need your help. The algorithm's a bitch, and we need to combat it. We need your help to pop. We can't do it on our own. So hit that like button. And also make sure you follow the Agents of Fandom on socials at Agents Fandom on TikTok and Twitter, Agents of Fandom everywhere else. Before we dive in, I'll give the spoiler warning now. Spoiler warning for Dune Part 2. If you haven't watched it yet, well, what are you even doing here in the first place? Watch it first, then come back to us. But I will give my thoughts last. But I don't feel like I know we live in a world of absolutes where you either love something or you hate it. But I don't think I was maybe quite as high on it as the both of you were. But hey, why bury the lead? Adam, what were your thoughts on Dune Part 2?
Well, that was some pretty impressive lead bearing it right there to just kind of say, like, I didn't really love it, but let me throw it to somebody that did. Yeah, that was impressive work right there. Well, no, I mean, I did love this movie. And not only, I always kind of judge movies and TV in particular on how much I enjoy. There's two scales for me. It's like how much I personally enjoyed it, how much I loved it. And then like the quality of it, like whether I thought generally those two align pretty similarly, but I've loved I've personally loved some pretty shitty movies, and there's been some really good movies that just didn't resonate with me. So it's not always like a 1-for-1 on that scale, but this is, and I'm with you too in the case of Absolute, that it's ridiculous now that people are always like, you got to love something, you got to hate it. There's no nuance anymore. But I don't need any nuance for this because I think this is like a 10 out of 10 movie, and I love it like a 10 out of 10 movie. So for me, on both scales, this is just as good as it gets. And we'll talk about that a little bit, like the specifics and everything later. I won't go into point for point why I love so much the movie. That's the point of this podcast. But yeah, I mean, I could not. I was really, really excited about this. This was my second most anticipated movie of the year, the only Deadpool 3. And it was kind of a toss-up. These were really, really close because I'm a huge Dune fan, but I'm also just a huge fan of sci-fi and these kind of like escapist worlds like this. But yeah, I'm just vamping right now on why I love it so much, which is exactly what I said I wasn't going to do. So, how much did you love this movie, and what did you think about it? Kind of give me like these type scale. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I also absolutely loved it, and I agree that it's a 10 out of 10 like movie, like kind of technical wise. I also love a lot of shitty movies, and I think that I love film in general because I think there's a place for really, really good movies like Oppenheimer and Dune, like things like that. But there's also a place for some really fun, like stupid movies. So I love the spectrum. But yeah, this was such a great experience because honestly, I watched Dune 1 and I found it kind of hard to pay attention. And maybe that's because I was like on my phone. I don't know. It could have been me. But I wasn't like fully drawn in yet. And I was like, okay, it's interesting, but we'll see. And so I wasn't like as hyped for Dune Part 2. But then I saw it and I'm like, holy crap, like this is so good. And I just felt so immersed in the world and like I am fully invested in the entire thing now. Like I understood what was going on. I was like just enthralled. And so like this is just such a good movie experience, such a good theater experience. I didn't have the gall to see it in IMAX because I don't know about IMAX yet. It's a really cool thing, but I just kind of I don't know. I did Dolby because I was like, all right, I want to see like the nice like visuals and sound, but I don't quite think IMAX is going to work for me. But it was just absolutely beautiful. No matter what format you see it in, it's just a beautiful movie. So I had a great time.
What this movie did is it actually inspired me to upgrade my home theater system downstairs, because this movie, I have a nice, big, beautiful TV, but my speaker system kind of sucks. Like I'm just using like TV speakers, you know what I mean? And so the reason it made me want to improve it is because this more than most, not even necessarily score. The score was great, and we'll get into the sound and stuff more. But that to me was what was so incredible about this movie, in addition to the visuals, is there have been very few movies to me that the sound mixing has enhanced the movie so much. Whereas I did really feel like I was feeling what I was supposed to feel in the moments. And a lot of that was because like, oh my God, a sandworm is ripping from the ground. Well, I think my whole theater is shaking right now. And it was pretty incredible. The story is kind of what didn't quite do it for me. And I think a portion of that has to do with, I just don't really think I'm a Denis Villeneuve guy. I don't really think he's my type of filmmaker. Obviously, he had the quote that, again, there's more nuance to this, but that went viral. And he said, like, I don't go to the theater. So as my dogs head in here, I don't go to the theater for dialogue. I don't remember dialogue from movies. I go to see the moving pictures. And, you know, there are very few people in the industry that I think can do the moving picture as well as Denis Villeneuve. But I'm the polar opposite. Poor CGI and poor effects, they actually don't bother me that much unless they're terrible, like unless it's just awful. And I leave movies remembering dialogue. I go there for the lines. That's what keeps me engaged in the story. And so I do think that's kind of why the Dune movies haven't hit quite as hard for me. Having said that, I still think this is like, for me, like probably like an 8.5 out of 10. I had a great time. It was a great movie. But just like not quite on that same, it was perfect level. And we'll get into some of those qualms later. Another sort of interesting viral question that has gone through the masses, through the internet, is people comparing Dune Part 2 to The Empire Strikes Back. And I think one of the reasons why is because of the drastic improvement from Dune Part 2 to Dune, the first one. Whereas for Empire Strikes Back, a lot of people were like, holy shit, that movie is a step up from the first one when that came out. And I think that's why it's very similar. And of course, with the sci-fi aspect of this as well. For me, I compared the Dune movies. I don't think it's Empire Strikes Back for me personally. And I think one of the reasons why is obviously we weren't there for that, where we weren't quite old enough. We were there for the prequels. We were there for the sequels, but not the original. And the one thing I've noticed is Infinity War and Endgame got close, but it wasn't the same. The only thing that has been on the level to me of even The Force Awakens in terms of people around me, the general public, not just our Twitter bubble, but their hype and their excitement level, the theaters being packed, people are dressing up, everybody's dressing up. The only thing that has come close to anything Star Wars that I've seen has been Barbie. Barbie has been the only thing that it's like, wow, I have never seen the theater out, just not even in the screening yet, not reacting to what's on screen, but like, I've never seen the theater this buzzing. What I compare the Dune movies to, at least through 2, are the Lord of the Rings trilogy. That's what this seems like to me, where especially the second and third one are so wildly critically acclaimed. They're beautiful. They're absolutely beautiful. They're so well done. They're going to win awards. And they're going to do well at the box office. The critics are going to love them. The general public's going to love them. And also for me personally, not quite my story, and I don't know why. And I just don't know why. It checks all my boxes, you know? It fits all the genres that I like, just not quite doing it for me, and I don't know why. I feel like it's much more comparable to Lord of the Rings in terms of reception than Star Wars. What do you think, Adam?
Yeah, so well, first I just want to say the place that this quote kind of this comparison and this quote kind of originated from was actually Christopher Nolan. I can't remember exactly, you have to excuse me, exactly who he was speaking to, but I think he has said a week or two before the movie came out that he had seen it, and that to him this was like just in terms of like a sequel, which is kind of how I judge it, is just like, because you're right, like in terms of what The Empire Strikes Back accomplished as a movie and what it did to the masses and how it moved forward the industry and did all these things. Like Dune Part 2 is not going to do that because one, there's that much there's not like a lot of room to improve like on the industry and everything in particular, and there's already a huge crave of sci-fi. Like that was Star Wars set off a whole, I mean, in general, like obviously A New Hope and originally just titled Star Wars, but like what Star Wars did to, I mean, pop culture in general is a phenomenon that will never be matched. So I would never try to compare it in terms of like a cultural phenomenon, because there's just, there will never be another comparison that is apt for that. But I will say, just in terms of like a sequel, kind of like the stuff you hit on initially, in terms of how this kind of builds on the original. One thing that I think is interesting too is I heard somebody the other day talking about like, because I think this is going to be similar to Oppenheimer this year, where like this movie I think is going to just sweep the award. Like I would be stunned if I see another movie throughout this year that I'm like, wow, that was better, that had better sound. Wow, that had better performances. Wow, that was a better picture. Like that was better direction. Like so many things that I think this movie is going to win or definitely be nominated for. And I saw people saying like, I don't know, you know, the Academy doesn't really love their sci-fi. And I'm like, Dune
They
Part
love
1
Dune.
won 6 Oscars and was nominated for 10. So I was like, I think these kind of fall outside of that realm a little bit, because I think they're so much more filmy, for lack of a better word, than like a Marvel movie or like a superhero movie or some of these other things that are still sci-fi. Because to me, something like a movie I recently rewatched, this is completely unrelated, but like Shang is like a truly great movie to me. But the Academy is never going to nominate a movie like Shang-Chi for Best Picture. But Dune just kind of falls in its own category, and I do think it's been. You're right too. To the Barbie comparison is good, and this is not doing anything close to what Barbie, and even really what Super Mario did last year, because I think Barbie was 1 and like Super Mario was 2, and I remember going to see both of those movies during the opening weekend, and Barbie in particular was like the whole theater, everybody was wearing pink, every showing was sold out. People were like dressed up as Barbie, and people were dressed up as Ken, and obviously we're not getting as much of that now. We've had that clip that just went viral, I believe yesterday, of the guy in the theater like riding the. That is I'm just like seeing that, and I'm like, cinema is truly back now. I don't think it went anywhere, but that's the only thing that I can say. I'm just like, we're so fucking back watching something like that.
We saw that with Spider-Man No Way Home as well.
Yeah,
right. That's a great.
That's the
point
only
too.
other one.
Yeah, especially in terms of like post or like since the start of the pandemic. You know, since in 2020, it's really just like No Way Home, Barbie, and I wouldn't even put what's it called? Super Mario kind of in that top. I'd put that in like the second category below it, but I would put Dune Part 2 in that top category now. And I know it's like box office wise, I think it just hit 200 million worldwide today. So it probably won't get to even as much as something like Oppenheimer. And it's also hard to put Oppenheimer in its own kind of comparison, because so much of its success, I personally feel, is attached to Barbie, and it has Barbie to thank for that because of the whole Barbenheimer thing. Because I don't think a lot of people that saw Oppenheimer probably wouldn't have seen it if it wasn't in the same, like going on the same thing and attached to Barbie so much. But yeah, I mean, TJ, so much of what you said is right. But if we're judging it, for me personally, just in terms of like, this is like a sci-fi sequel, like, is this the best sci-fi sequel like of this generation? I think it is. And I think this is, I know it's like, it's easy to roll, like for people to roll eyes when somebody says like, this is one of the best I've ever seen, especially when I've said it twice the last year between like Oppenheimer and this, it's like, okay, so you're going to see a movie every year that's one of the best movies you've ever seen. Well, if we're going to keep getting movies as good as Oppenheimer and Dune Part 2,
I hope
then
so.
I hope so too.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Then every movie, I'm going to get a couple movies a year that I think are one of the best movies I've ever seen. So while I do agree with you that it's absolutely not like in terms of a pop culture thing, it won't have the same effect, and it won't do the same thing to the culture that Empire Strikes Back did. I think there are some comparisons there that aren't completely crazy. What do you think, Em?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think like just in terms of like a big sci-fi sequel that's kind of, I mean, I guess our generation kind of also had Lord of the Rings. Like I think we were still pretty young, but old enough. But I think it maybe definitely not in the cultural phenomenon way, but I think it definitely, I agree that it's like just as big as pretty much any of the other really big sci-fi sequels.
The other thing that reminds me with Lord of the Rings of Dune as well is specifically how much critics and awards critics love it. Like, Lord of the Rings also is like one of those movies that you don't, if you compare Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter, you're not expecting Harry Potter to win any awards, right? But Lord of the Rings was.
Right.
Sorry, continue.
Yeah. Oh, no. Yeah, that's kind of what, I mean, I think, yeah, no, I don't really think I have anything else to say about that. I completely agree with everything you guys said, honestly.
I do have another question for you because we have the Oscars this weekend. And we were talking about like, how will this do at next year's Oscars? Obviously, it's not going to be part of this one. Sound mixing and all that different stuff, visual effects. I think this is going to sweep. I'm with Adam 100%. I think this is going to sweep. But Emma, are there any performances that you think will garner award buzz, whether it be leading male actor, leading a female actor, who they should be, and where do you think they should maybe be nominated?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think there could be a good case for Timothy as his performance. Zendaya's performance was really good. They kind of what you said about dialogue. It wasn't like Cillian Murphy in Oppenheimer where it was like, you know, he had all of this dialogue and screen time. But their performances when they did have their scenes were absolutely phenomenal. I kind of disagree with everybody talking about Austin Butler. I really, really liked his performance, but I don't know if that's going to be Oscar worthy. I don't think it is. But honestly, I would argue for Timothy and Zendaya because they both did an absolutely amazing job. And I really like, especially in the third act, like I really just like felt it. And I was like, ooh, okay, this was really good. So I really wouldn't be surprised. I would bet on it.
Adam, what do you think?
I agree with you too, especially about Austin Butler, and that, you know, so much of the talk going into this movie, a lot of it about him was like, this is like a Heath Ledger Dark Knight. Like I remember seeing people talking about that, and like I watched it and I'm like, okay, like he's good and he's terrifying, but like he's not that, like I'm not gonna be thinking about Fade Rotha in 3 months. Yeah. I haven't even thought about Fade Rotha since I left the like he's good and he's scary, but that's not. And one, that's a tough comparison, especially like the Dark Knight. Like when I saw that, I was immediately skeptical, and I was like, okay, that's still I think the best villain performance that I've ever seen, and it may be. I know here I am falling right back into this is one of the best things I've ever seen. It's
one of the best things I've ever seen.
But sure. It is. You can't argue that.
So it's like when I see some like comparisons like that, and now granted, I think this kind of ties back into TJ what you were talking about earlier, this era of absolutes where somebody can't just say like, yeah, he's good. It's like this is a genre-defying performance comparable to Heath, and it's like no, it's really not that good. He's not even in the movie enough, in my opinion, to qualify for something like that because we get so much Heath Ledger in The Dark Knight. He's like equal to the feels. I'm sure the numbers are off on it, but it feels like equal parts screen time to like Christian Bale in that movie because there's so much Dark Knight. But in this, Fade Rotha is really not even in it that much, and you could probably write everything that he says in like one short paragraph. And I think a lot of that too is, it goes back to what you said, TJ, about what Denis Villeneuve said, that so much of what he does is more based on like eliciting feeling and as like through sound and visuals as opposed to, like putting those connections together yourself, like with the story. And you were right too, that people took that way out of context, and that quote blew up in a way and people were getting really upset in a way that I think oftentimes people do in terms of not reading the story, not reading the actual story and just going off a headline and seeing that one thing, oh, he's an idiot for that. And it's like, well, he's really not. If you actually read what he was saying there, it makes sense, and that's just his style too. Every filmmaker has, most of them have a very distinct style, and that's just his style. But performance wise, yeah, I mean, I agree that Austin Butler was definitely a little overhyped. While I think he was good, but I think Timmy will get one for best actor. Now I don't know if he'll win. That's one of those things that's really tough to say. While I know for a fact that this movie will win some awards, and it's tough to say performance wise because there's a lot of movies that are not on anybody's radar right now that are going to be have people nominated for best actor, best actress. So I think he'll be in there. It wouldn't surprise me if he doesn't win, just because, like you said, it was a great point, M2, that there's not a lot of dialogue, so which I think will kind of work against them in that. But Rebecca Ferguson is really, really great in this movie too. So there are some performances that I would like to see get some love, but and Zendaya is great too. But so much of her acting is like with her eyes and with her expressions as opposed to the things that she's saying. So while I'd love to see them collect some hardware for that, it wouldn't surprise me if they don't. If people come out and dominate, because like last year, I talked so much about how I thought Oppenheimer, and I still do think Oppenheimer deserves to win, especially Cillian Murphy for best lead actor. But Em, I think you'll agree with me on this too. I went and saw American Fiction. Like if Jeffrey Wright steals that from Cillian Murphy, I'm not going to be upset because Jeffrey Wright is outstanding in that movie. And it's an example to me that I'm like, I need to not be upset about something like that anymore. Like instead of, oh wow, I can't believe he didn't win. When I haven't seen the other performance, because then I watched American Fiction. And I was like, this is one, at the risk of saying, this is one of the best movies I've ever seen. So
it also really is.
It's so really is. That movie, that's a 10 out of 10. That's a 10 out of 10 movie. It's great. But yeah, I mean, just to bring it back to what you said, TJ, yeah, there's some great performances, but because this movie doesn't rely as much on its performances, I wouldn't be surprised if nobody claims any hardware for that particular category.
I'm proud of myself with the Oscars this year because I'm going to watch Poor Things tonight. It's obviously now on Disney Plus, and after that, I will have seen everything except for Anatomy of the Fall in terms of the Best Picture movies. So, crushing through those. I watched Maestro last night.
Yeah, I'm gonna watch that.
Enjoyed it far more than I expected. I like our fellow agent, our mutual friend who actually just took Wheels Up today to South by Southwest, Ethan Simi. He adores Maestro and always talks it up. And when I saw this, I genuinely thought like, oh, this movie's not going to be for me, because there is like, it's such a big contrast for me because there are very few people in the industry whose film analysis I respect as much as Ethan Simi. He is so talented at breaking stuff down and understanding film. But we have totally different tastes. We have totally different tastes in movies. Anything he loves, I usually don't like. Anything I love, he usually doesn't like. But we kind of, I was surprised because Maestro actually did hit for me quite a bit. But I do think the one performance specifically, and apologies for kind of skipping around in the rundown, but it just felt like an appropriate segue. I do think Rebecca Ferguson is the one that stands out as like, she could win. She could win supporting actress. And a lot of that depends on the pool. Like Margot Robbie this year didn't get a nomination for best supporting for best lead actress, which on the surface feels super crazy. You look at the nominees and it's like, well, damn, who do you take out?
Yeah.
And so it so much depends on the pool. But I do think that was the performance to me that stuck out the most, as like that could win because that was special. When she's on the screen, you're noticing it stands out. I do think the one thing that could potentially hold back Denis from winning Best Director is, this is kind of something I would dock. I don't know if other people feel this way necessarily, though. And that was one of the things, Emma, I talked to Damon, host of the Comic Corner, and our mutual friend and agent about Dune. He mentioned how like he agreed with the Austin Butler thing about how he didn't feel like he was even in Dune. He thought he was watching him audition for Pirates of the Caribbean because he just had such a weird, like a pirate accent on the whole time.
It was a weird voice.
But I don't even remember where I was going with that. Oh yeah, right, Denis. I do think the one thing that wasn't well enough articulated, and this is a quote that from Leonard Bernstein that I got to see that was in Maestro yesterday, and it was about how unless I'm just ADHDing and mixing up two totally different people's things, but it was about how art is not meant to answer questions. It's meant to create questions. It's meant to elicit reactions. And so I do think that Denis Villeneuve's thought here was, this is what is happening. Give your own perspective on it. What is your reaction? How does this make you feel? I think that's what he was attempting to elicit. But I think the message of the movie would have been stronger with more Zendaya. And not necessarily just more screen time and more lines, but emphasizing her perspective more. Because the story of Paul Atreides is very much white savior story, right? White savior trope of like, go into this culture and learn their culture and be the best one, be the savior, be the messiah. Now, obviously, as you dive into the movie, you learn like this is the Bene Gesserit that's orchestrating this. This is only one side of the story. But I thought it looked a little bit. I was able to watch it and kind of go. And apologies for skipping ahead again, but damn, Paul, poor decision making, bro. Like, what are you doing here? This is not what you should be doing. You dick. You're falling into the white savior thing. But I kind of felt like the movie almost framed it too much like this was a positive. This was a good thing. He is fulfilling his destiny. He's getting there. Now, maybe that was just me reading it wrong, though, too. I think if it was more emphasized, because Zendaya was the voice of, this is bad. Like, I love you for you. You're not the Messiah. You're just a nice guy who is learning our ways and fighting. And that's who you are. I love you. And when he's doing this other shit, she's actively saying like, no, this is bad. Don't be doing that. That is not the right way. I think if we got a little bit more from her perspective, it would have been enhanced even more than it already was. Adam, I'll throw it back to you here to either choose a new thought or to expand on if you have if you want to on that one.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'd love to expand on that because, like, personally, I disagree with that. And the reason that I do it, I think the existence of Zendaya's I'll never advocate for less Zendaya or even the same amount of. I would have loved to see more of her in this movie, but the existence of her character, the purpose, kind of nullifies the idea that to me that like Paul is a white savior, because like while he is jumping, and then shout out to Joanna Robinson, who came on this very show and talked with us about the MCU, but one time had a great thread talking exactly about this point about like, for those that think Paul is a white savior, and I'm sure it's up on her Twitter right now, so I'd advocate for anybody to go read it. She was like, for those that think Paul is a white savior, go like here's some points and things that I want you, and like I read through that and I was like, because even when I watched it the first time, I was like, this feels a little too white savior for me. And I was also kind of swept up in the moment of what was going on, because watching this for the first time for me was such an experience. But the existence of her character to me kind of nullifies that, because it seems pretty obvious to me what's going on here is wrong. And the only reason that Stilgar and these other, like the fundamentalists, I believe they're called in the movie, even think that it's right is because they've been conditioned by the Bene Gesserit. That there's no part of what's going on here that's like actually going to work out well for anybody. That like if more people would have just listened to Zendaya and Zendaya's character Chani, that they would actually be heading in a much better direction. Because this seems to me like something that, and now I'm also kind of talking on eggshells a little bit, because walking on eggshells a little bit around this point, because I had to do a little bit of research for what happens next in these books. So I know what happens next. I'm not going to say anything that, at least because they've also been very different. Like Denny has adapted these books very differently than what goes on in Frank Herbert's interpretation of all this. So I'm not going to, even though I don't know how spoilery it would really be, because Denny may take this and just do his own thing entirely like he's been doing. But this seems to me like something like at the end, they won the battle, but they've almost set themselves on a path for inevitably the war here. There's no it's Robert Downey. I kept thinking about Robert Downey Jr. As Iron Man, and I can't even remember which MCU movie it is now. It's when he's talking to Loki. That's right. It's when he's talking to Loki at the end of the Avengers, and he's like, "There's no throne. There's no path to this where you come out on top." Like, and right now, that's exactly what it like. There's some similarities to like Paul and Loki. Like it seems like he's on top of the world, charging into this. Granted, the battles go a little bit different because Loki gets hemmed around by Hulk, and Paul ends up killing Feyd-Rautha, so it's a little bit different. But like I see that complaint, and I definitely see the element of there. Like there's on the surface level, there is like an element like, hey, you've got this white guy that comes to the planet from a different place and is now quote Messiah savior. Like I see that, but to me, they're also framing it very clearly. Like especially once I had the chance to see it now 3 times and really kind of look out for which. I shouldn't judge that because like not everyone's going to see a movie 3 times and judge it differently the second and third time. So that's completely fair. But to me, it's so clearly being framed in a way that is not going to turn out well that doesn't bother me. And I think most of that is because of Zendaya. She's at work the whole movie from the very like 30 minutes in when Lady Jessica is going through her transformation, right? And Paul's kind of standing outside and they're trying to pray and do this. And she's like, they're fucking crazy. They're like, that's ridiculous. None of that's even real. That's all just like, that's been the shit that's been planted in their minds. It's all fake. She's great anytime she's kind of going through all that, especially one of her favorite deliveries is not even like a line. It's when they start arguing. She's like, oh, she goes, because she's just so sick of hearing them talk about that. It's like, I love that every single time. But I don't know. I know I went for like 5 minutes on this, but that's just my, and again, I'm not going to tell you that you're wrong and all that. That's just that's my perspective and my take on it that I don't feel because I'm not, I know that how this is like the white guy saying it's not a white savior thing. I know, trust me, I know how that sounds, but there are other movies that like Avatar has got a very, very horrible, like the Avatar, James Cameron's Avatar is just a horrible, undefendable, like white savior trope in those movies. And like, I still like those movies, but like I acknowledge and for a lot of the same reasons I like Dune because it's a very immersive experience. Like spending time with it to me is therapeutic. Just love the world and I love the characters that exist within that world. But I acknowledge that there is a very, very evident white savior trope at play there. And I don't think the reason that I think it's like it's not at play here is because like in the Avatar movies, there's nothing that ever directs in any direction other than Jake Sully being like the one that's like saving everybody because that's what he does in both movies. He's the one that saves everybody. When in this, like Paul saves people from in a perspective, but like I feel like they're headed for some absolutely atrocious, horrible, horrible things, all because he decided to ascend the throne. So, Emma, what did
I think that one thing I want to touch on quick before is I think what you said what made a lot of sense is he's not a white savior because he is leading them to doom. And that to me makes a lot of sense. But I guess on the first watch wanted that to be clearer of like to me it felt a lot like this was a protagonist I was cheering for through for 2/3 of the movie because he's acknowledging that would be me. I am not your savior. I'm not white savior. I don't want to do that. And then it's basically like, son, drink the worm pee. Okay, fine. I will drink the worm pee. And now I am going to lead this entire culture to doom. That was the turn a little bit. That was like, well, damn, what the fuck? But Emma, what were your thoughts on that whole thing?
Yeah, pretty much. I agree with Adam. Like, I think I understand that interpretation. So, because at first I'm like, okay, yeah, this definitely feels very white saviory. But like you said, I don't think he's ultimately saving them. He's leading them to some bad things. And it was really interesting because I think like the first, you said like the first 2/3 of the movie, I was like, oh, like I'm rooting for him. And clearly Lady Jessica was kind of the bad guy. I was like, ooh, I don't like where she's going with this. And I think the reason why it took that turn for me, and I was starting to realize like this is where he is going is not good, is because of Zendaya's character. And so I did feel like we got a good perspective from her, just like because she was the person kind of like counteracting what was going on. And so that for me as a viewer, I was like, okay, I think I'm seeing where this is going and it's not good. So I think I would kind of argue that, I mean, of course, like you said, also, I would love to see more of Zendaya, and I always would like, anything where she's in it more. But I feel like for me, just, because of her character is how I kind of was able to like, okay, I mean, not just, because I was seeing like, okay, like this feels weird. And, as soon as he drank the piss, I was like, talking about being a Harkonnen and stuff. I was like, ooh, okay, you're going to turn out bad. This is not fun.
What I loved about that is almost like the symbolism of that's a term, right? He's drinking the piss of just like he's buying what they're selling, and then with Zendaya, it's like, oh no, that's literal worm piss. I thought that was like such a funny way of wording that. And yeah, I really like both of your perspectives. And the way I'm kind of looking at it is I see like the way Anakin Skywalker's turn to the dark side was written in the prequels. Too obvious. Too much. I'm angry and gonna be a bad guy now. It was great in the Clone Wars show. Too much in the prequels. For me, there was just not quite enough of that for Paul Atreides. It was almost like, hey, I was supposed to be a bad guy, but I'm gonna be a good guy. No, just kidding, bad guy now. And so like I thought there should have been a little bit more leading up to it so it wasn't such an aggressive heel turn.
I also agree with the Avatar comparison. Sorry, I just forgot I was going to say that. That's what I was thinking too, because Avatar to me was just an egregious white savior thing. Like, I don't even, honestly, the movies are great, like visually. I don't know if I'm really the biggest fan of them in general, but I think that's one of the, like, you could tell, like, that's just so, like, it doesn't do any work really to me to counteract that, oh, like, white savior trope is bad. It's just like this is fine. And so I don't really see that these are comparable in that sense. Like I think this movie does a better job of like, oh, this is a bad thing. So that's how I see the difference there.
And one thing that I haven't read the books, but one of my understanding is it's they make it very clear throughout the books is that like the Atreides and the Harkonnen, Paul and Feyd-Rautha are essentially two sides of the same coin. You know, it's just it's the wrong way of doing things, no matter how you go about it. They're both wrong. Is sort of how my understanding of the book was explained to me. But speaking on the Harkonnen, we get to see a lot more of their planet in this one. We get to see a lot more of their culture, a lot more of their planet. We get to see a lot more of Stellan Skarsgård looking all juicy. I'll throw it to you first on this one, Em. You already gave your thoughts a little bit on Austin Butler's performance. What was your thoughts on the whole crew, Dave Bautista, Stellan Skarsgård, Austin, and the planet?
It was really interesting. I mean, it's funny because I forgot or like didn't realize that Stellan Skarsgård was the Baron in the first movie, and then within like 2 seconds, I was like, oh yeah, that's Stellan Skarsgård. That's like, even though he's in like he looks unrecognizable, his face, I was like, oh, that's him and his voice. I knew it. So I thought he did a great job. Dave Bautista, I love to death, and I thought he gave a great performance, but I was honestly happy when they killed his character because I was like, I cannot listen to this man scream any longer. I just can't. And so I was like happy with how that went. But it was really interesting to see their plans kind of unfold, and this kind of led me to like understanding a little bit more about what's going on rather than in the first movie. Like I was like, oh, I see what's happening here. I thought the planet was really cool. It was also, I mean, I'm sure we'll get to the visuals and stuff, but it was definitely like so interesting, you know, going from Arrakis and like the sand and just the light, the differences in light from like the other planets and Arrakis. Like it kind of was just like, whoa, like a little startling every time they switched back and forth. I was like, this is really cool. But yeah, this is going to be really fascinating. It's interesting to see how the Bene Gesserit are kind of playing into this too. I'm like, all right, there's like more under the surface that's happening here. I'm really interested to see how this goes. But I was glad to be rid of Feyd-Rautha and like all those guys. I'm like, I'm done with you.
That was the other part that I found kind of interesting is I felt maybe it's just like, again, this may be a me problem more than the movie problem, but I almost felt like the movie was often kind of going like Atreides and Fremen protagonists, Harkonnen antagonists, when realistically it's more like Bene Gesserit antagonists, everybody else fucking pawns.
Yeah.
Just getting used, getting manipulated. Adam, what did you think about the time spent on the Harkonnen planet?
So one of my first thoughts was like that it's no wonder that every single one of the Harkonnens is fucking psycho. Like after spending time on it. But I want to say a shout out to, and I may be butchering her name, Leah Seydoux. I may be absolutely butchering, but she is like the kind of small term like heat check MVP of this movie because we only see her for like 5 minutes. But her scenes when she's talking to Princess Irulan and the Reverend Mother, I can't even remember the other Reverend Mother's name, and then when she's talking to Austin, she's absolutely brilliant. Now, granted, we only get her for like 5 minutes, so she won't be able to like qualify for any kind of awards or anything like that. But I haven't really been seeing as much recognition for her performance as I would like, because she was, I think, in like, if you just take screen time based on like what they accomplished, may have been the best like performance in the movie because she was thrilling. But the visuals, I mean, is just like, this is all this to me. When I see a planet like this, I know people get sick of hearing me, TJ. I know you probably don't, but other people get sick of hearing me complain about visuals, complain about the volume, and complain about this kind of stuff. But when we get something like this planet, the arena, the fireworks, like the black and white bubbles exploding in the air, and two, the best part, the way they handled this was so brilliant. How when we first see Stellan Skarsgård's character, the Baron, come out of like his little tunnel, he looks like the lighting is normal, like you can see his, but then as he steps out, it turns like it slowly fades into black and white. That I have no idea how they do it. It's probably a very easy thing, like to just update the filters as he's moving in production. But that to me, I'm watching, I'm like, oh, that's just magnetizing. Like I can't get over it. But I watch a planet like this where everything, like especially in the arena, the overhead shots, and then we would go like just go right down into the arena and be right on top of Austin Butler's character as he's fighting. I'm like, this ruins other shows for me, because in other movies and things where they look just objectively to me objectively terrible when there's just so often standing in front of a sound
In my
stage.
opinion, it's objectively terrible.
It is. I know that's
a little bit of an oxymoron there.
It is an oxymoron, but it's like I'm gonna do a little misdirection because I didn't get a chance to talk about Avatar last week, and I think you guys were probably, unless I know Ryan had a similar complaint to me, but you guys may have been missing my volume, my visual hating analysis, and that there were some times in that show, like more times than I would like to admit, where if you literally just focused away from the characters talking, you could see where the floor ended and where the sound curtain began. You could literally see it. Like it was so odd. The visuals in that show were, I really, really enjoyed that show. I'm super excited to get seasons 2 and 3. But
I'm too busy focused on the dialogue.
I also very much don't notice bad. Like even if I try, unless it's egregiously bad, I just don't notice it. But you can tell, like I can tell when something's like is objectively really good, like Dune and stuff like that. And yeah, so I get that, but I'm also definitely like I don't really care that much about like when it's bad. I just don't care.
And I wish that's how my brain. I wish it's like, because an Avatar was brutal because so often there's every line of dialogue in that. And I know we're completely talking about a different thing here. I'll bring it back here in a sec, but they're 3 inches from all the characters' faces because they're like, hey, don't dare look anywhere else. It'll look horrible if you look anywhere else. Just please focus on the characters that are speaking right now. But I bring this back to say that it's the visuals in a scene like that. I mean, throughout the whole movie, really, but especially on Gedi Prime, the Harkonnens planet. It's just like this ruins other visuals that are not like movies that have visuals that are not like up to par with this, because this is as good as it gets. This may be visually the most beautiful movie that I've ever seen, and I have no idea how much of this was shot green screen, the volume, how much of it was actually out in a desert somewhere. Like I have no idea, and that's how it should be. You should never be able to tell, like, oh, well, the entirety of the show was shot in the volume, or the entirety of the show was shot. Now, like, obviously, there's plenty of movies and shows where the entirety is just shot on actual sets and buildings and in real places. That's a great thing. We love that. But that, to me, like the mark of a great sci-fi movie is when you can't really tell what, like, this I can't discern that it's not real. This seems very real. Like every movie seemed real, which added to the immersive layer of it. But yeah, it wouldn't be an Agents of Fandom podcast without me getting off my shots at the volume. I have to do it once every, even in a movie that is just visually beautiful. I had to find a way to kind of misdirect and talk about how much I hate the volume. That's just part of my character. It's like a canon event for me. And once per show, there's a canon event in which I have to shit on the volume. So I'm glad I got it out. But yeah, getting to see the Harkonnens on this planet, it's no wonder they're all fucking crazy. But at least it looks beautiful.
One of the
it
things
was cool, the black and white. I really like that.
Yeah, that was a very cool shot as well. Another shot from the movie that was pretty incredible was just the mixing of sound and visuals with the calling of the sandworms and the riding of the sandworms. I do think it's funny. A thought that I had when I was watching this movie is how the hell did they get off of the sandworms?
Yeah.
And then Denis Villeneuve had an interview where he's like, I actually have started making a plan for that for Dune Messiah. I will address that in Dune Messiah. And so I'm happy he had the same thought. And what was your I honestly, going into this movie, I genuinely didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah, the sound mixing was so cool, and like you said, it kind of like it really felt like the whole theater was shaking when they were like riding the sandworm, and just like it worked really well. And it'll be interesting to see when it comes out on like streaming or VOD or whatever, to watch it on like a regular TV, because I'm curious how the sound is gonna play through with that. Um, I mean, I use subtitles like for everything, but I was able to like follow along without subtitles, and I felt like some of the, like, you know, it's kind of quiet, and then when they would use like the voice, like Lady Jessica would use the voice, it like scared the shit out of me, because I was like, okay, like this is like, it's really effective though. And the soundworm, like when they were like doing the thing, I was like, this is, I mean, it's soundworm, I thought it was really cool, like you could just feel it. And so I think that adds to the experience where you could like feel the sound, because it's, you know, as Nicole Kidman says, like sound that you can feel or whatever. And it just really adds to the like immersive theater experience, because you're like, I don't know, it like whenever they were like doing the sandworm thing, it like my heart was racing, because I'm just like, oh my god, like this is, it's kind of like, it's nerve-wracking. So I just thought it was absolutely awesome.
Adam, for this next part, I'll throw it to you here, and I actually have a question, because as I'm going through this rundown, I've just butchered it so much, and I've gone to different parts so much that I don't actually remember what's from where. So when you talked about in our rundown Paul embracing his identity, are you referring to within the Fremen when he's still good boy Paul, or are you talking about post Wormpy bad boy Paul?
When I put that in the rundown, I was talking about Bad Boy Paul, because that scene to me where he drinks the stuff and wakes up. I'm not going to call it what you call it, but he drinks the water of life, and he wakes up, and then
He
it's
drinks
just,
from the PP cup.
Yeah, we'll say that. Yeah, he drinks from the cup. But yeah, but like that scene to me is kind of when the entire third act really takes off. But one, I want to, you know, you were just going to skip over me and talking about the worm. Like, I mean, unbelievable, right?
I forgot. I forgot. That's on me.
As a co-host
I
on this show.
apologize.
I build the rundown, and then he's like, "You're not even going to get the shit." No, I'm just kidding. But
you should have hosted this one. I told you this was not my bag. I forgot to take my ADHD meds this morning.
So you're doing absolutely awesome. I have to give you, that's like the two biggest things. I have to talk about the volume, and I have to give you a hard time. Like now we can have a great show now. But no, the disappointing thing about the soundworm was that I saw this already, because I went and rewatched Dune part 1 in theaters like a couple weeks before part 2 came out, and you know they were marketing as like an exclusive sneak peek at Dune part 2. Well, that's the scene that they showed a sneak peek. So it was kind of like in the context, like I was like, wow, this movie's going to be crazy. But I wish I would have experienced that for the first time, like in the context of the movie, and not as just its own clip, like following rewatching part 1. But it was a great scene. The music, like it's almost like opera level, like theater music. You can just hear that screaming, that guttural, visceral screaming, but it makes you just fired up. But like all the stuff, the thumpers, I mean, you hit on everything great. It really does. It like shakes you to your core, especially the voice and all the thumpers and all that kind of stuff. It's the way they use sound in this movie. I mean, I know that was what you said like at the very beginning at the top, was like the biggest compliment that you could pay. I think that's like, if that was if you told that to Denny, that'd be like his favorite thing ever, because that's probably exactly what he was like. If somebody came to him and was like, wow, the dialogue you wrote for this movie was great, he'd probably be like, ugh,
like, yeah, whatever.
I failed. But like if somebody's like, the visuals and the sound and everything was great, like that's what he wants. So, and he accomplished that. But yeah, just to bring it back to the question that you actually asked me for like the 10th time, going off the rail, and
I don't even remember what it was
about something different. Yeah. When I said embracing his identity, I probably should have like prefaced that with like false identity, like faux identity, because it's really like the identity that his mother has kind of shaped for him, and not who he wants to be. But that is one that I think is the scene that will get Timmy a nomination. And if he is somehow able to win, like if there's not a lot of strong performances this year, like there was last year, and he's able to win, it will be because of this scene. Because when he's standing up there talking and he spits that guy's like life story back out to him, and he goes from being, because when he first walks in, he immediately sets the tone with like no one in this room can stand with me. Like and which is already, it's like, okay, well, I guess the savior, the Messiah is here, but this is not quite how I would think a Messiah would treat the people that he's supposed to be, like leading and doing these things. Cause he jumps right in, he's talking down to him. But then when he like leans down and he's like reading that dude's mind, that's what he's doing. He's like, but you think you might have a chance. But then you're also wondering, what if I'm the person you've been praying for? Like, that is one of the best movie scenes that I've ever seen. It is though. It's one of the best scenes in any movie.
Speak your truth.
Because I almost feel like he's talking to. I felt like he's talking to me. I'm like, me? Yeah. Like the way the camera focuses on him and the way he delivers, like Timmy delivers all of that. I'm calling him Timmy, like I know I've known the dude forever. The way Timothy Chalamet.
I feel like I have to call him Timmy too.
Timmy Cha-Cha.
It's brilliant. That's the one scene. That's the one scene to me that I've now seen this 3 times that hit just as hard for me each time. And even like the second and third times, knowing that it was coming and trying to prepare myself for what I was getting ready to watch, I still couldn't accurately get ready, because it still it shook me to my core watching him spit that guy's life story back to him. And then I was just, and it also seems like everybody in you can almost like look around. It seems like it's like, you almost like get strapped into your chair because he's not using the voice. He's not commanding anybody to listen to him. They could easily just jump up and attack him. But because of like the figure that he is now believed to be by his people, he doesn't even have to do that kind of stuff anymore because they do view him as this Messiah, even though like we talked about earlier, it's not real. But that scene to me is like the most important scene in the movie. So I had to put it on the rundown.
I would have just yelled right back at him. You're not reading my mind, motherfucker. Your little sister, your mom, and your grandma are in your ears telling me what in your ears telling you what happened to me because they've lived it, because they exist outside of time and space. And what were your thoughts on that scene?
Yeah, that was the like you said, that was the scene that I was like, oh shit, like he is acting, like this was good. It really shook me. I was like, oh, okay. Like I kind of reacted to it. Just absolutely commanded the screen. And that's when I knew. I was like, yeah, he's a bad guy. And this is all just fucked up. And I don't know. I don't like any of it. And I was getting nervous. I'm like, what is going to happen? Like what's happening here? Like, is something going to blow up right now? Like what's going on? But I thought it was a brilliant scene and really it was just I don't know, the whole thing was just such a crazy experience. And I really was just like fully in it at that point.
Getting a little psychological with it, I do wonder how much my lack of enjoyment towards Paul's story was based out of my own privilege and my own ego of somebody who is a white man who used to be pretty douchey and who has become educated and has learned. And I try to better myself, and married an indigenous person, and we're having our indigenous child. And so I wanted him to be like, you're entering this culture. You're going to be respectful. You're going to learn, and we're going to cheer for you. You fuck. You stupid guy named Paul. Get a better name.
Yes, his name is Paul. Like, come on now.
and then he basically just fails. Right? He falls into that the white privilege of being the Messiah and going, I get to do whatever I want because I'm part of this family. I drink this juice, which gives me the special powers to talk to my ancestors and my future ancestors. Screw it. And I just didn't want him to do that. I even we got the Anya Taylor-Joy cameo, and I thought that was really cool as his little sister. And again, I love cheering for Anya Taylor-Joy. She's one of my favorite young actors out there. I want to cheer for her. And they're bad, and I didn't want it. And so maybe that's just like my own issues coming to the forefront of how I felt about that. But we got the final fight. I agree with what you guys said earlier about Austin Butler, although I thought he was pretty fucking awesome. Not enough screen time for him to get nominated for anything or to get compared to the greater villains we've seen. And he's also just not really the main villain. He's a henchman that has a shitload of mental health problems and went crazy killing people. And so, I mean, maybe not. I probably shouldn't have worded it that way either. Apologies. But anyways, SEO WordPress always tells me not to use crazy whenever I'm typing, and I put in
It's
crazy.
nice of
It says
WordPress.
that is not inclusive language, and I'm like, fuck, you're right,
That
WordPress.
that
Thank
is
you.
good of WordPress. I like that.
Yeah, thank you for noticing that. I gotta check myself there. But we finally get the matchup between Austin Butler and Timmy Chacha, Faye Broaden and Paul Atreides. Adam, what did you think about getting to see these two go head to head? Like, from a story standpoint, the coming to the conclusion of this being how it ends, and also that the hand-to-hand combat itself, the fight.
Well, I mean, the whole thing, I will say this was one of my only complaints. Like, now, I still gave this movie a 10 out of 10. I still think it's great. But one of my only kind of complaints was that Timmy says to him, or Paul, excuse me, that's so much better. Paul
Gotcha.
says to him, like, I've been looking forward to meeting you. And I'm like, well, you know, he kind of just arrived on this planet like a day ago. And then, like, because Dave Bautista was up so bad, was fucking up so bad they had to call his little brother in, who then just completely got there and was like, oh, let's just do this. And it's like, Bautista really was he was a bitch in this movie, which is a shame because the first movie built him up to be this terrifying presence. And then when you listen to him screaming, he's like bashing that dude's head on the table. He's like, rats. I'm like, oh, this dude doesn't play any games. And then he runs into Paul in the desert and he just completely takes. I know I'm just, once again, you asked me about the final fight and I'm talking about Bautista running away from Paul in the desert. But yeah, that fight was, I think, probably one of the best choreographed and just shot. You know, everything about that fight was great. And I love that, like we talked about earlier, the sound and the score dominate the whole last hour of the movie. And then we get to this and it's completely silent. Nobody's talking. The only thing we hear are blades like bumping into each other and then like people gasping, like when Paul gets stabbed and these things. And that is such a brilliant thing because there's a reality in which this is with music rise to where we can tell immediately the music's getting ready to hit its climax right as Paul stabbed him. And like that doesn't really feel the same because like, I was wondering, like when Paul got stabbed, like I wasn't like, okay, well, he's getting ready to die. Obviously we know Paul Atreides, the main character of the movie, is not going to die, but I was like, what's getting ready to happen here? Is Gurney getting ready to step in? Because you remember he says to him, he's like, let me deal with this animal. I was like, is Gurney going to have to step in? And is this going to like now kind of illegitimize Paul because he couldn't do, like, I was really wondering what was going to happen there, which is not often the case in like final third act fight scenes. Like I love a good third act fight scene. I mean, everybody does, but they can be kind of predictable because 99% of the time the hero prevails. I mean, that's part of why Infinity War is so great because it's consistently the villain. Like you're constantly wondering, okay, well, surely the heroes are going to pull this off, and then they just don't. Then they lose. That's why that movie is so great, and why I think it's probably the best comic book movie ever. But you didn't ask me about Avengers Infinity War. That scene
On
to
that
me,
note, that's all. I truly think, poor CGI aside, that's all Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania needed to get received better.
That's fair.
You have that last scene and have Ant-Man realize, fuck, this isn't my universe.
Yeah.
Bam, that movie is so much better because there were consequences.
yeah, I agree with that. Shout out to I mentioned them if it was early on this podcast or early on the other one we recorded right before this when you mentioned one of our newest members, TJ Pastilli, Fat Thor. For those of you who follow him on socials and are familiar with him, we actually had a delightful conversation about Quantumania yesterday, of which we both completely disagreed. And then we remarked at how refreshing it was to have a conversation with somebody that you disagree with, and for neither one of us to get mad or be insulting the other person. It's very refreshing because that's, as we all know, that's a very rare thing nowadays. But yeah, I mean, that whole, what else is there to say, man? That whole final act, or the whole final fight scene is brilliant. Like I can still close my eyes and imagine what it felt like watching that for the first time, just because cutting out the sound completely after the sound played such a big part in it. And then it's just like the choreographed, the way it's shot. Because one of my biggest complaints about fight scenes is when the camera cuts too much. Is when it gets like every time the blade clashes, that there's a cut, because then it gets hard to follow. But there's like a few of them, but for the most part, I wonder how many times it took them to film that all the way through, because it's like I feel like I'm actually watching Timothée Chalamet and Austin Butler fight each other with swords. It felt really, really real, really visceral and stuff. So that the final fight was great, truly.
I couldn't agree more. That's actually the reason I don't like the Jason Bourne movies, is they're just cutting left, right, and center a little bit too often for me. I think the stories are cool. The cuts, not for me. Em, how did you feel about the final fight? Both the choreographing and how it looked, and the meaning behind it all of him ascending to his quote unquote potential throne.
Yeah. No, it definitely looked awesome, and I was like on the edge of my seat. I thought the meeting it was tough because I wanted him to kill Fade Rotha because he was like bye, but then it meant that he's kind of ascending to his turn. So I was like, ooh, this is tricky. Like I don't really want either of them to win. I just want both of them to lose. Like I was just like, this is not good, but obviously for the purposes of the story.
If you win. I just need Kylo Ren to lose.
Yeah, I was trying to remember where I got that. I know I've like heard that recently so many times, and I can't remember where it actually like comes from, but I'm gonna use it. But I was just like, yeah, it was rough, but it was nice to see it. Like, I was happy to see Fade Rotha finally gets killed. But yeah, it was just an excellent fight scene. Like you said, no sound. It was blades clashing. I feel like everybody else, it kind of did feel like they were just fighting, and like everyone in the scene and the audience were kind of just waiting to see what would happen, and no one knew what would happen. So everybody was kind of reacting alongside, and I thought that was just really cool. Yeah, and then it was just so cool. And then he went and pulled a hey Florence Pugh, like let's get married type of thing. That was just crazy. I know that's not the same thing, but I was just like, damn, okay, Paul, like
That was crazy.
he is.
Why? Why would you do that to Zendaya, Paul?
I know.
This is why we don't trust someone named Paul.
Yeah, never trust a motherfucker named Paul. That was my takeaway.
That actually is the last thing I wanted to touch on before we get out of here is Florence Pugh's performance, because she is the one that I felt like we didn't really talk much about. The other thing is when just bringing up Josh Brolin and Dave Bautista, like you guys had previously, when they were going at each other, literally all I could think about was, Drax gets beat up by Thanos again. That was all that was going through my mind when I saw that, is this guy cannot catch a break. Josh Brolin at half his size is constantly just beating the shit out of him. But Florence Pugh, I thought the performance was very good, but I also thought the character was incredibly important, because while Zendaya was the voice of reason throughout this movie, I almost thought Florence was like the voice of the audience, of like, she doesn't really know what's going on, but she wants to be educated. She wants to learn so she can do what she has to do. And she's writing her note. She's explaining. I thought her character did a kind of a good job of summarizing the audience voice a little bit and being like a window into what's going on. What did you think, Em?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I thought like we were kind of discovering, or she was kind of discovering things alongside the audience. And like, oh, okay. Like, I think she's going to be pretty important. And I saw a quote. I don't know if this was taken out of context, but I think when she was kind of like signing on to this movie, Denis kind of promised her, like, if you do this movie, like, you're going to be featured heavily in Dune Messiah.
He did the same thing with Zendaya in the first one, I think.
Yeah,
like,
okay,
hey, we need
sense.
you to play a little baby role in this first one. It's going to be big in the next one, though.
Yep, exactly. So I was like, okay, well, that makes me excited to see more of her, because I think she's going to end up playing a pretty important part.
Yeah, a pretty important part, and then she is just absolutely amazing in everything that she's in. What did you think of her role, Adam?
Yeah, she was great, and going in, like watching this the first time, like I said, I've done a little bit of research, since I originally watched. But watching the first time and just all of this being completely new and fresh to me, I was pretty surprised to learn like that she's also a member of the Bene Gesserit, because when she's like, "Your Highness continues to prove why she was my most acute student." So then, from that moment on, I was like, "Oh, she's going to use the voice on somebody. She has to." And then I was waiting, because like Florence Pugh would just completely eat that up, just like Rebecca Ferguson did. So I was looking. I wanted to see some of that. I'm hoping that because then, like after doing some research, I don't think it's a spoiler to say she is trained as a Bene Gesserit and can use the voice and do these things. So I'm hoping that we get to see that in the third movie. But yeah, she was great. It was, in a way, like you guys said, it mirrors a lot of Zendaya, where I was kind of hoping we would get more of her, but it makes sense. It leads perfectly into her having a large role in the next movie, just like it did with Zendaya. Like, they meet at the end, and now she's obviously going to be a central figure. He proposes to her, at the end, and now they're going to get married, and they're probably going to be butting heads a lot and doing all this kinds of stuff. So, but yeah, I mean, just like I said, I'm not going to, just like with Zendaya, I'm not going to advocate for less, or even just the same. I need more Florence Pugh in the next movie, because she really was She was great, and the character, like you said too, TJ, was really brilliant too. I was interested by her.
And no movie can truly succeed at a very high level at the box office without a good meme performance. And this movie knocked it out of the park with Stilgar being the comedic relief and kind of choosing to use him as comedic relief, as like the leader of the fundamentalists, the leader of the extremists and the believers that Paul is the Messiah. To have him be a little bit comedic, I thought was an interesting choice that worked very well. Before we get out of here, Adam, I'll throw it to you first. Closing thoughts on Dune Part 2.
Well, I just want to add, I'll give a brief close after this, but I want to add one thing about Stilgar too that so amazing and so well done is that that he is used as comedic relief through the first 2/3. And then once that scene gets there, like another point to me that kind of drives home that Paul is not the good. Stilgar is standing there begging him to kill him. There's no reality. And like, even Paul is like, he's like, why would I deprive us of like the best of us? Like he's not going to do it. But then you get to the end, and by the third act, it's like, this isn't funny anymore. Like everybody was laughing at it the whole time. But then when he's standing there being like, take my water to the well and take my place, it's like, wait, what? Like we were laughing at you like for 2 hours. You're serious? You really want him to walk up to you and kill you? And that was the way they shifted the tone in that, I thought worked really well to kind of establish him as not as much of just like, hey, this was all a joke, but like this is actually very serious and this is not good. But
the reason I thought that was such a good choice too was that's so mirrored to real life.
Yeah,
you look at Donald Trump. Yeah. Pardon me. Makes me sick.
Just like, yeah, exactly.
Leading up to 2017, the first 2 acts of his election run were a joke. It was comedic. It was, look at all the funny quotes this orange idiot is saying. Ha ha ha. Wouldn't it ever be funny if he became president? He's not going to. And then it happened. And that was literally the flick of the switch with Stilgar. This is the comedic guy. He says funny things. We laugh at his jokes. And then when he feels like his prophecy is coming true, he's done what he needs to do, that like he just flips a switch.
Yep.
Okay. But that was brilliantly said too. Brilliantly said. But yeah, the closing thoughts, this was like I know like my favorite movie of the year so far. We're not that far into the year, so there's not a lot of competition. But in terms of like the 21st century, or like just not the 21st century, but last couple of years, like this to me is it's like right up here. Yeah, 2020 and beyond. Yeah, thank you. So that was exactly what I was trying to say. This like Oppenheimer, like Top Gun Maverick. I know opinions range on that a lot, but Spider-Man No Way Home. These are all like some of the biggest, like, just in terms of, I think they're great movies, but they're also like big events in my life. Like I think I'll look back in 5 or 10 years and remember the weekend that I had, like this past weekend, and everybody talking about this movie, because we all watch a lot of great movies all the time. This is our life, but there's not a lot of things that I think back and I'm like, I remember exactly what it was like. I remember watching it. I remember coming out of it. I remember writing it. I remember like talking to people about it. I remember what it was like on social media. I remember the memes. It takes a really, really special movie, I think, to resonate that well with people. And that's what this movie has done with me. And I think a lot of other people. And I've so much enjoyed like memeing this movie and laughing about it and enjoying it and talking about it and doing all these, like the Stilgar meme has just been one of the most iconic movie memes of like the last few years, seeing the way people have been using that. But yeah, this has just been, anytime we get these kinds of experiences like Dune Part 2 offers for those of us that do enjoy it and want to be engaged in it, I think it's important to just appreciate them and take them in stride and love them and go about your business. Like keep doing this kind of stuff and like more and more, because this stuff doesn't come around all that much. Like movies this great that bring people together like this don't come around as often as we all wish they would. But because they don't come around that often, that means that's why they're special. So I don't know, that I took that way in a direction that I was not preparing, but I feel like that's a pretty apt to describe how this movie has made me feel the last week and a half, which is just really, really happy. I loved it. And I'm glad it exists.
Emma, where can the people find you on socials, and hit me with your closing thoughts?
Let's see. Social, Twitter @_EMMINEM. Yep, I think that's right. And then, I don't know, find me on Letterboxd actually instead of anything else. I think it's just Emma, Jaclyn, Emma Jaclyn. And then, yeah, closing thoughts. I agree completely. I think it's like, when a movie is big when there's like a specific meme that just kind of goes around and it's like really great and really funny. It's like the Oppenheimer meme with him going like this, like and the other one where like the guy's yelling at him. There's just some good ones that there's just so many good things to like use it for that it's just wonderful. But I just love this experience. I love this movie, and it really is just awesome to have so many of these experiences in the past few years. Like it just really, like, I came out of Dune just like, oh, I love movies. Like I just love it. And like I had gone on like a little bit of a period. Like sometimes I just don't feel like going to the movie, like the theater, and I'm just like, oh, I'll just watch stuff at home. Like I just don't feel like it. But once I kind of break out of that, and like Dune was like my movie back after like a couple weeks, and I was like, oh, this is so great. And so now I'm just like amped up and ready to keep going back to the theater. So I'm very happy with it.
A movie is really spectacular when it's getting memed all across the internet. That's why Madam Web is my favorite movie of 2024. No, I'm just kidding. I actually haven't even seen it yet.
Going from Madam Web to Dune, I was like, oh, wow, that's a difference.
Make sure you follow the Agents of Fandom wherever you get your socials. I combined the two reads there. Make sure you follow the Agents of Fandom on socials at Agents Fandom on TikTok and Twitter, Agents of Fandom everywhere else. And of course, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. If you are watching us on YouTube, check the website every day. We got lots of great content coming all the time. And next week, we will be chatting not only the Bad Batch, but Episode 5 of Invincible is back. Season 2, Part 2 begins. We will be breaking that down, as well as giving our thoughts on the new Disney Plus and Hulu FX show, Shogun. And speaking of, Adam has written some great Shogun articles, and Emma has one on the way as well. So if you're enjoying that show, make sure you check out the website. We will be back breaking it down next week. Thank you so much for tuning in, everyone. On behalf of myself, Adam, Emma, and all the agents behind the scenes, we'll see you next week. Peace.
Peace.